So today, guys, I want to talk about that one word that's holding you back. I suppose it's the quiet little troublemaker that's been running your life without you even noticing. It's not fear, it's not failure, and it's not even that voice in your head that's telling you that you're not good enough. It's, hey, welcome to Wow Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk about all things mindset, all things confidence, and taking action, even when it feels scary. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Your mindset shapes everything. The way you think, the way you show up, the way you go after what you really want, and it all starts in your head. So if you've ever felt stuck, doubted yourself, or wondered if you're really capable of more, you're in the right place. Each week, let's break through those mental blocks, shift your perspective, and start making things happen. It's not fear, it's not failure, and it's not even that voice in your head that's telling you that you're not good enough. It's should. And that word is so sneaky, and it's got a way more power than you actually think. So whether you're feeling stuck in your career, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by your goals, or you're just constantly feeling guilty about things that you haven't done, if you look at it, that word should is probably the common thread. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack it. And I promise, once you learn how to spot it and shift it, your life is going to start to feel like a whole lot lighter. So the first thing I want to talk about is why should is such a big deal. And what I want you to realize is that it's really guilt dressed up. And, I think we think it's helpful. So, for example, I should go to the gym, or I, should call my mom, or, I should do this, I should do that. But it doesn't actually come from a place of love, I suppose. It comes more from a place of guilt. And, guilt really does drain your energy. It's like, I suppose it's like trying to run a marathon, in wet jeans. And it does disconnect you from your desire. So when we say, should, what we really mean is that somebody else expects this of me. And then what we've done is we've internalized it so deeply that we've actually forgot to question it. So I'll give you a bit of an example, right? You'll hear lots of people, particularly women, when it gets to a certain, when they get to a certain age, it's like, I should settle down by now, all right? I remember years and years ago, when I was 28 years of age, and for those of you that have been following me for a while, you know that I got married. And part of the reason that I followed through with that marriage was because I felt it was something I should do. All my friends, people that I knew, who were similar age, were all it was kind of almost like the done thing. By 30, you were married and you'd got the house, and then it was the kids and all of that, and were to ensue. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but you have to ask, where does that come from? And when I started to question it, it was like an expectation from society, almost like a conditioning. It wasn't actually something that I wanted. So going back to that example, you want to ask yourself, do I even want that right now? Or is that someone else's timeline? So when I started to question myself, and it's part of the reason that I left after a short period of time, because in my head I'm going this is my life and I need to live it on my terms, but I'm doing what society expects of me. And it come from this little word should. I should be getting married, I should be settling down, I should be planning the family, but it was someone else's timeline. And I think that, we see it it's almost like the language of obligation. Should tells you what to do, but never why. So going back to that scenario, I was saying to myself, I should get married, but I didn't know why. Why 30? Why does it have to be by a certain time frame? And it's a little bit like having a boss who's giving you lots of jobs to do, but there's no vision of where the company is going or why you should do it. So when you act from should, you're really performing life. You're not actually living it. And I want you to think about it think about having a backpack on your back, right? And I want you to imagine that you're carrying this backpack and it's filled with heavy bricks, but each brick has a should on it, right? So, like you have a brick saying, I should be more successful by now. Another one saying, I should lose weight. Another one saying, I should be more productive. Another one saying, I should go to the gym. Another one like, I should buy a house. I should be settled down. Like, if you think about it, like if you're carrying all that weight around you, you're going to be absolutely exhausted before you have even gone anywhere. So what I want to challenge you listeners here today is I want you to think of like 3 shoulds that you've actually been carrying around with you lately. And I want you to ask yourself, where did they come from? And do they even belong to you? Or is it something that you've been conditioned by society to believe that you should do? And then the second part that I want to touch upon is like, it's the origin of should. Like, like where does it actually come from? And I believe that it starts really early. I think it comes from childhood conditioning. We're told from a young age, oh, you should say please, you should say thank you should share even if you don't want to. And I'm not suggesting that like we don't have manners and, we don't say thank you and we don't share or whatever, but it does come from early in childhood. And as I said, it starts off with manners, but it morphs into like a lifetime of people pleasing. If you think of the social conditioning from school, media, religion, culture, we're told you should be polite, you should be quiet, you should be ambitious, but not too ambitious. Like I said earlier, you should be married by 30, you should have kids by 35, you should buy a house, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. Okay? And if you actually think about it, you're playing a game, but nobody told you the rules or who even made those rules. And I want you to imagine that like your life is like a movie script, but that you didn't write the script. So it's a little bit like being an actor in a film that you didn't write. Every scene you're playing out and you keep saying your lines, but they're not actually your lines. If that makes sense, you're just doing it because that's what you should do. So I want you to question, the script that you've been handed in life. What if you chose a different road? What if you rewrote the script? So I know all that's well and good, but you're probably all sitting there like, thinking to yourself, yes, Sharon, that's all well and good. But, how do you break free from should? Like if, we're talking about, as I said, like a lifetime of condition here from when we were kids. So the first thing, and I always talk about self-awareness. I say self-awareness is a superpower. So the first thing is to catch it. Start listening to your own language. Every time you say should, stop and ask yourself, says who? And I have a little practical exercise for you. This week, what I want you to do is I want you to write down every should thought that pops into your head for the next 2 days. Okay, so I want you to start to become really, really aware of that and take a note of it. And maybe you write it down on your phone or wherever's handy. And then, at the end of the 2 days, I want you to review the list and ask yourself, whose voice is this really? And do I want to keep this? So I want you to frame it a little bit like a wardrobe clean out. So ask yourself, is this belief, is it still my style? Or is it someone else's hand-me-down? And then the next part then is I want you to reframe it. What I want you to do is I want you to replace the word should with more empowering language. Okay? So I want you to use words like in phrases like I get to, I choose to. So one of the things I used to say, oh, I should go to the gym. I should go for that walk. So now what I say to myself is I get to go to the gym. I went to the gym this morning. In my head, I'm going like, I'm not saying that I still don't have that thought, but like I can catch it really quickly and reframe it really, really quickly. So, when the alarm went this morning, I'm going like, oh, I should go to the gym. But then like really quickly, like I stop and I go like, no, Sharon, you get to go to the gym. There's people that don't have that opportunity. You get to go. And it means the scenario plays out in a positive in my head. So, like as I said, like examples like that, I should work out. Saying to yourself, I get to work out, I get to move my body today because I want to feel strong. I should be further along in my business. I should be further along in my career. It's like, I get to build a business. I get to build my career. I get to feel aligned, with where I want to be right now. So start, changing those phrases. Just remember, like, you're almost like the DJ of your life. So stop playing other people's playlists on repeat and start, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, remixing your own tracks. Choose, what gets airtime in your mind. And then the third part is then you want to connect to your why. So I talk a lot about your why. One of my big goals in life is financial freedom, but that's very vast and I suppose very surface level, but it's the digging into the why, beneath that. And our whys a lot of it comes from generally something to do with our childhood or something in our past. When you're saying something to yourself, so it's I should be settled down by 30. Ask yourself, do I actually want this? And what would it look like if I followed what I really wanted, not what I think I should want? And if I'm being honest with you, that's what I done way back all those years ago. I probably didn't realize at the time what I was doing, but I asked myself, is this what I really want? Do I really want to be married and settled down and having children and all at this age? And and then I started playing around and I did, well, what if I followed what I really wanted? And eventually did end up doing that. And I have to say it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Without understanding, it was harder in the time, but if I had realised and had the self-awareness that I have now, it probably would have been a lot easier of a decision to make. So going back to what I said earlier on, think about, what is one should you've been dragging around with you that doesn't belong to you anymore? And, what would you rather believe or choose instead? And that's the reframing part of it. And then what I want you to do is I want you to make space for what you want. I always say, your life is like a canvas. Don't give the paintbrush to anyone else. And you just have one life. It goes by really, really quickly without sounding morbid or anything like that. But, you want to get to live it on your terms. So when you ditch the shoulds, what you're actually doing is you're making room for aligned action. So you start to trust yourself more. You become the authority in your own life. And when you stop shoulding, this is how your life is going to change. You're going to feel lighter, both mentally and emotionally. I remember, in the lead up to making that decision all those years ago, the burden and stuff that I felt. And obviously, after I'd made the decision, there was a lot of people that were annoyed at me and stuff. But what ensued then afterwards, I suppose emotionally I felt freer, mentally I felt freer, and I knew I'd made the right decision. But you start to build your confidence as well, because you start trusting your own decisions, and you'll also spend less time procrastinating and more time creating. And what ends up happening is that you're not actually chasing other people's timelines. You're finally living your own timeline and doing what you want to do when you want to do. And it's, like I said, you're the artist of your own canvas, and your life isn't a spreadsheet or a checklist. It's a painting, and there's no shoulds in art. It's only choices, but they need to be your choices. So to wrap up, for anyone that has been following me online, and you will have noticed that we're launching our new newsletter. So by the time this podcast comes out, our newsletter will actually have been launched. So I would love if you would follow the link in my bio where you can get access to the newsletter there. The link is also in the description in the podcast as well, so you'll be able to get it there too. A few things, I want you to remember, you don't owe anyone the life they imagine for you. You owe it to yourself to stop living under a pile of shoulds and to start, living from choice, and start living from clarity, but also from a place of confidence. Yeah, you're going to disappoint a lot of people, but that's on them. It's not about them, it's about you. What I would really love if you could do is if you could share one should, and that you're letting go of this week. You can tag me on Instagram, or you can, DM me on Instagram, or on here on Spotify or YouTube or Apple. And I'd love to know what is your biggest should that you're throwing in the bin today. Yeah. And that's my words of wisdom for today's episode of Wow. I hope this gives you something to think about, because remember, your mindset shapes your reality. The way you choose to think today will impact what you create tomorrow. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, tag me, or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Catch you next time.